Great. Welcome back from the break. And I know people are just going to be getting in here in the next minute or so. Hope you had a chance to navigate the platform, look at who's attending the conference, check out the sponsors and see what they have to offer. A lot of good information, a lot of good resource material. Great first session. I'm really looking forward to this session as well. This is the Idaho Tribal Programs session. And I'm going to just introduce our moderator, Terri Griffith. And Terri serves as the Region 10 Program Coordinator for Brownfield Assessment, Cleanup, and Multi-Purpose Competition Process. She has over 15 years experience working with local communities and tribes to address contaminated properties using a variety of tools through EPA's Brownfields program. She's also the state of Idaho's liaison and has a wealth of experience when she's developing a business on a formal Brownfields project, if you will. So with that, Terri, fill in the blanks of everything I left off of your experience and your work with EPA, and I'll let you introduce the panel and look forward to sitting back and watching.
Thank you, Greg. And so, like everyone, we're going to try the technology here, and hopefully it works. Share. Hopefully you can see my screen. And so thank you everyone for joining today. It's so good to be with you on this fine spring day. The sun is peeking out here in Seattle. My name again is Terri Griffith, and I'm a Brownfields project manager with the EPA Region 10 Brownfield program. And I'm also the EPA Brownfield liaison with the state of Idaho. Today, I'm pleased and honored to moderate the session with our three presenters. First up, we'll have Tiffany Allgood with the Coeur d'Alene tribe, followed by Kelly Wright with the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, and finally, Audrey Martinez with the Perce tribe. And everybody's waving. So before we begin, I'd like to provide a short overview of the EPA state and tribal response program to kind of set the stage for our three presentations, which will cover a range of topics from program and regulatory development to a case study of site-specific assessment work. I just have a few slides I'd like to share to get us started before I hand over to our three panelists today for the main event. So I'll try to make this quick. So this is just a slide. You might recognize the picture from earlier from our fundamentals presentation. It just kind of provides an overview of the Brownfield program and the history. And then we have our standard definition of the Brownfield sites. One of the main goals, of course, of the Brownfield program is to provide funding opportunities to assess, clean up, and ultimately reuse and revitalize brownfields. All righty, and this is another slide you might recognize if you're in the earlier session. Just a quick snapshot of the variety of brownfield programs available through EPA to tribes, states, other communities, including local governments and nonprofits. And just kind of some background, we have both competitive and non-competitive grants. Our two main competitive grant programs are the Multi-Purpose Assessment Revolving Loan Fund and Cleanup Grant Program, otherwise known as MARC. And then we've got the Job Training Program as well. So those are the two competitive programs. Then we also have the Targeted Brownfields Assessment Program, which is a service that EPA provides rather than a grant program. And that's a really great tool that's available for any community in our region. In addition, we also have a variety of technical assistance tools widely available to both grantees and other communities that are addressing brownfields. You don't have to be a grantee, so keep that in mind. Finally, our focus today is one of our largest grant programs, the non-competitive Brownfield State and Tribal Response Program. So Section 128A of CERCLA, the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, also known as Superfund, authorizes a non-competitive grant program to enhance and establish state and tribal environmental response programs. So what does that mean? Essentially, It's funding to states and tribes to develop their own programs to address contaminated sites. And so here in this slide, we're just showing the federal fiscal year 2022 funding, the regular appropriation, which we provide 50 million in funding for 50 states, the District of Columbia, 5 territories, and 113 tribes. That's nationally, just this year. And then in EPA Region 10, we have a portion of that pot, of that 50 million is 7.8 million to our 4 states and 33 tribes, including the state of Idaho Brownfield program that you heard from in the earlier session, and the 3 tribal programs in Idaho that we'll be hearing from in a few minutes. And then also this year, for the first time, we have the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or infrastructure law funding, which will also provide approximately 300 million under the State and Tribal Response Program to all of our states and tribes in the nation over the next 5 years. So that's about 60 million available nationally per year. So it's an unprecedented opportunity. And David Zen went into that in a little more detail earlier. So if you missed that session, you can get some more information in the recording. So this just kind of gives you a broad overview of the program. And keep in mind that the program is really meant to be flexible in implementation and tailored to the needs of each of the tribes that runs these programs. And when we hear later in a few minutes from our presenters, we'll really see the breadth of what these programs and what activities are being completed under the programs. So the main requirement is the establishment and enhancement of the 4 elements in public record. And I know this is really dry material, so it's provided there. You can take a look at it, but essentially survey an inventory of brownfield sites or just any sites of concern. They may not be determined to be brownfields yet, but they're sites that the tribe is concerned about. The development of oversight and enforcement authorities, and then also opportunities for community engagement and public participation is key to this program. And then finally, element 4 is the mechanisms for approval of a cleanup plan. And the other key requirement is the establishment and maintenance of the public record of sites where response actions are ongoing or planned. And those actions may be those the tribe has taken themselves, or actions that others, for example, other government agencies or private owners are taking where the tribe is providing oversight. And you'll hear more about that from Kelly Wright with the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. And then this is just a list of eligible activities. These are not inclusive. There's many things that can be done depending on the needs of the program. And, of course, the inventory of sites of concern is one of the key things for kind of the foundational piece of this program. The most tribes get started with that part. And then we have also, of course, really key is development of codes, policies, and procedures to build administrative and legal capacity. Also staff training to enhance programmatic and technical capacity, development of emergency response plans and coordination with other agencies and tribes, and conducting limited site assessments, cleanups, and oversight. And we'll hear more about some site assessment work that is going on with the Nez Perce tribe from Audrey Martinez. And finally, of course, conducting community education and outreach. And so the last slide is just everyone's contact information. Each of our presenters would welcome you to call or email them. So that's provided there. And I want to thank you for attending the session. And with that, I will hand it off to Tiffany Allgood with the Coeur d'Alene tribe. Tiffany is the manager of the Environmental Programs Office in the tribe's Natural Resources Department. Tiffany, are you ready to roll here? Let me see if I can. Let me stop sharing. For some reason, I am having trouble seeing the share button. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Looks good.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, Tiffany, take it away.
Good morning. I think I'm one of those people that freezes on camera. So I've been just kind of sitting here frozen. But good morning. And I miss the times when we can actually see the people that are listening. It helps me to understand, how people are feeling about what I'm saying, and I can go into more detail and things. So I'm going to just go ahead and give this presentation, but know that I wish that we were all together. This is a presentation on the Coeur d'Alene Tribe Fields Response Program. It's a 128A program like Terri was talking about. I am in the Natural Resources Department, and I manage one of the programs for the Coeur d'Alene Tribe in the Natural Resources Department. It's called the Environmental Programs Office. And that office, our office, manages a lot of different EPA and other projects and programs. So we have environmental health and wetlands and brownfields, and we do a host of things: climate change, energy efficiency, and renewable energy projects. So I wear a lot of hats, and I'm not as technical in the brownfields as I'd like to be. But I want to give a brief background on the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, why we started a brownfields program, what we've done so far, a little bit of our site-specific work, and what we're planning to do in the future, a few challenges to talk about, and then I also have contact information. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly so other people have time to continue their presentation. The tribe is in the panhandle of the northern Idaho panhandle, and the reservation itself is about 334,000 acres. The Aboriginal territory is more than 5 million acres. We had about 6,700 residents in 2010 census, so it's pretty rural. Tribal enrollment's over 2,500 people, and it's continuing to grow. We've relied on forestry, agriculture for a long time, 50, 70 years, 100 years for agriculture, and now gaming in the last 20, 30 years in the current economy. But the tribe does and has always continued traditional activities, cultural activities, fishing, hunting, gathering foods and medicines. Here's a landscape of the Skicha-Umsh. That's what the Coeur d'Alenes call themselves. That's the name that means those who were found here. And you can see the Aboriginal territories in the dotted line, very large. Reservation boundaries right now are in the solid black line. And here's a more close-up of the reservation itself. And you can see the brown areas tend to be more agriculture. The green areas tend to be more forest. And we just have a little bit of development in certain nodes in the cities there. Here's an old picture of a ferry on Coeur d'Alene Lake that used to transport people. I think this is probably Hayburn State Park. Old picture of a July 4th celebration in Plummer, the middle of the reservation, 1922. Here's a picture of the Mission Village down in the southern part of the reservation back in 1920. It really hasn't changed all that much right there. Here's a picture of students that were taken away from their families and made to go to a school that the Jesuits ran, called the Sisters. At least that's what, I think that's the unofficial name. But to give you an idea of some of the acculturation that was forced on the tribe. Here's a current Coeur d'Alene Lake picture. And here's a picture of the canoe journey. The canoe culture is coming back, bringing that back. Here's another picture of the southern part of the reservation, Tencent area that's agriculture and forest mixed together. Well, we began the Brownfields program in 2016 because there was a site in the southern part of the reservation that the forestry department was going to work on, and we knew it was an old landfill. And forestry asked us, can we work on this? And the landfill wasn't lined properly. It wasn't capped, according to current regulations, because it was done before those regulations were in effect. So we thought we better assess this. And that's when I approached the Brownfields program manager and said, is there funding for this? Can we do this for this project? And that's how we got started with it. And we also knew of other sites. We did some solid waste assessment and knew that there were other old landfills around the reservation, as well as other sites that were potentially problematic. So since we started, we have hired outside assistance in competitive processes. We've gotten consultants, and we've got a consultant right now, but we also used to have Alta as a contractor. But now we have White Shield, and we have developed a list of potentially contaminated sites. And there are about 29 sites that we know of, and that's kind of growing over time. And we've screened the list for potentially brownfield eligible sites. We have 18 sites and collected information on them. We visited most of these sites and have collected GPS coordinates on them. Here's just a map of how scattered those sites are. They're different types of sites: agricultural sites, RCRA sites, air quality sites, agricultural sites, things like that. We posted a site, and we have revised it at least annually. We've identified some potentially high priority sites to choose from to do site-specific work. We've held some internal tribal brownfields advisory group meetings with department heads across the tribe, and we've held one tribal community brownfields meeting so far, and we haven't been holding meetings since the pandemic started. So we're hoping to get that started back up shortly. I hope that this lull continues. We've also researched various screening levels for soil, water, and air, just to kind of get an idea of what we might want to do and to know the differences between them. We've compiled information on other tribes and other entities' response programs. We've developed a tribal brownfields outreach plan, which is in draft. And we also have a draft standard operating procedures manual for our brownfields program. We've researched response program codes, and we have been coordinating with other governments on brownfields work, such as Steve Gill in Idaho State, and then the city of Plummer. We're working on a site together right now. Some site-specific work, we have the old Tencent landfill. That's in the southern part of the reservation. It's about 20 acres in total, but the landfill proper is about 5 acres. That was opened in about 1969, and it was closed in the late 80s or early 90s. And we think there's various types of contamination in there. We don't really know what's in there. And we think that there's potential impacts to at least groundwater and surface water. And it's eligible. We went through the eligibility process for that. Here's a map. You can see that the box that's got the white line around it, that's the parcel. And then the dot is where we are working, and down near Tencent and DSMET. Here's a picture of clothesline that are growing on it. But of course, we wanted to do is manage those trees. And you can see an aerial photo of the footprint of the 5 acres there. Here's a moose in the farm field pretty close to the Tencent landfill. And these are the kinds of things we want to protect because we utilize the wildlife and we want to also have them be healthy for it. So we've completed and submitted a Region 10 site eligibility worksheet. We completed a phase 1 report for the Tencent landfill. We completed a site-specific sampling plan to conduct a geophysical assessment at the site to help us determine where to sample. We did the geophysical assessment, completed that report, and used it to develop the sampling plan. We also got permission to do a phase 2 environmental site assessment from EPA. Then we completed a quality assurance project plan and a health and safety plan for the phase 2. And we worked with our tribe's historic preservation officer on the sampling plan. Here's where we sampled. There's some trenches, observation pits, some grab samples, in areas where there were some refuse that had been scattered outside of the 5 acre proper landfill area. We also completed an Endangered Species Act compliance with EPA through Army Corps for phase 2 sampling. We entered the phase 1 ESA into the acres website. and we completed phase 2 sampling and completed a report. We think there's more work to do here. I don't really feel like the site was fully characterized, and we're working with EPA on that. So we have just started some site-specific work at the Worley Co-op. It's less than 1 acre. It was developed in the 1930s or 1940s. It's right on Highway 95 in Worley, and it sold petroleum products, fertilizer, seed and feed, and possibly other farm chemicals. It has leaking underground storage tanks on it too. It's currently a vacant lot. The buildings that were on there may have had, we were pretty sure that it had some kind of asbestos and lead. So we want to make sure that we sample that site. There's potential impacts to soil, groundwater, and surface water. It's EPA Brownfields eligible as well. So this is a picture of the vacant lot right here on. And we've also gotten phase 1 environmental site assessment eligibility worksheet approved by EPA. We've completed a draft of the phase 1 and we're currently reviewing that. And we completed a draft of the quality assurance project plan and health and safety plan. So then the last one that we're working on so far is the old agency building. Here's a picture of it. It was built in the 70s and it's about 8,000 square feet. It's not in use, so it's kind of vacant. And we'd like to do a hazardous materials survey prior to the tribe doing either renovation or demolition of it. And it's EPA eligible for Brownfield. So we've done the same thing with this site. We did an eligibility worksheet. We completed a draft of the phase 1, and we completed the draft quality assurance plan and health and safety plan for the phase 2 EFA. We're working with EPA on that pretty soon for the next step. So what we're planning to do is continue to update our public record, update our site data into acres, continue and hopefully have some public meetings and internal brownfields, and we want to continue to build our program. We want to continue to look at our brownfields list for new sites, add sites if needed, continue to conduct site-specific work, and also conduct long-term monitoring, mitigation, and or cleanup if needed. So the challenges are learning an EPA program and understanding its potential. It takes time to get a new program up and running, and you need to determine what's needed to support the program. And in this case, I think you need a full-time brownfields coordinator, and so that's what I'm kind of hoping for, get one full-time equivalent position. Right now, it's kind of just, we're doing pieces of it with different staff members. And also the time it takes to get approvals internally at the tribe and the time to get EPA approvals, it can take really a long time to get things done. Anyway, this is my link to the tribe's brownfields public record on our website. And if you wanted to reach me, that's my contact information. I hope that I didn't take too much time, and I'm happy to pass it along. Try to stop sharing my screen here.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thanks for your great presentation. That was a lot of information and a lot of excellent work that you and the tribe are doing under your program. And I will introduce next, without further ado, Kelly Wright from the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. And Kelly is the Environmental Waste Management Program Manager. So it's all yours, Kelly. Just need to take yourself off mute and we're good to go. Oh, Kelly, you're still on mute.
Bottom of the screen, Kelly.
Yeah, just to the left at the bottom of the screen. If you hover, you should see a little microphone. Very left corner.
There we go. Thank you for unmuting me. Because down in the very left-hand corner, all it was an arrow button. I'd like to thank EPA and Greg for giving me the opportunity to present on the Shoshone-Bannock Tribes Brownfield program. And then in our focus, we're looking at our regulatory development. And so just to give you a little bit of history, That's the seal of the environmental, or the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. And we have the environmental waste program, which I'm the program manager and have been since 2005. The Fort Hall Reservation, just to give you a little bit background about what how big the reservation is. It was a peace treaty that was signed by the Fort Bridger Peace Treaty, signed July 3rd, 1868. Our membership is just over 6,000 tribal members. And we have approximately 545,000 acres or 815 square miles, with 97% of that held in trust for the tribes. It's located within 4 different counties. We include Bannock County, Bingham County, Caribou, and Powder County. The next slide that I'm showing is we're comprised of 5 different districts. We have the Bannock County, which is, or Bannock Creek, which is down here. We have Fort Hall, Gibson, and Lincoln Creek, and the Ross Fork. That's where the membership districts are. As everybody's heard, the Brownfields program basically provides grants and technical assistance to the community, state, tribes, and others to assess, safely clean up, and sustainably reuse contaminated properties. And as if you heard this morning, one of the ones that, for those of you who know, Susan Morales was always grumpy with those of us that would put Browns with the S in before the field. And then she would always tell us she was going to cut the funding. So I've made sure that my staff make sure we know it's Brownsfields. Basically, what we have done with our Brownsfield is we have keep the membership aware. We conduct phase 1s annually. We've conduct phase 2s. We've also identified and we're educating the community on what environmental conditions are, or as Brownsfields like to call it, the RECs. We're identifying other local areas of environmental concerns that we have on the reservation. And then the last one that we've done is we had a new opportunity to prepare environmental regulations. And I'd like to take the rest of the time to talk about why we did regulatory development. The first one really, I mean, I like to be bold and say we're a sovereign nation. We have the ability to take care of ourselves, but it actually stems back in 2005 when we were in front of federal court judge, and he told us that, you know, the state had regulations, the EPA had regulations, so why didn't we have any? And so, make a long story short, we decided that that would be our best avenue to approach, was to work on writing our own regulations. Our regulation is known as the Waste Management Act. And the reason for that is the fact that the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act does not allow tribes the ability to have that delegated authority to them. On the other hand, CERCLA can be done that way, but RCRA unfortunately was established in the early 70s, and that'll get me on another soapbox, so I'll try to stay off of that one. It's just that in order for us to be able to get our deal, one of the other differences, our other deal being the Waste Management Act, what we did with, I mean, our biggest concern is risk assessments. EPA has a tendency, as well as the state, they look at 50 to 100 years. Tribes are taught to look out for at least 7 different generations. So if we all do the math, there's a lot longer period in a tribal cultural standpoint than there is in the 50 to 100 years. And our other deal was, who better to ensure protection of human health and the environment than those that are on the reservation itself. As guaranteed by the peace treaty that was signed, the tribes have the ability to go out to unoccupied lands of the federal government to hunt, fish, gather, and collect. And so in order to practice that, we have to stay on the reservation within the boundaries, we cannot leave. So who better to take care of your own ground than yourself? As I was talking, our regulatory development process was the Waste Management Act. It's basically a combination of the RCRA and CERCLA, as known by most everybody in the environmental fields. We have a permit regulation. We developed our own soil cleanup standards for contaminated properties. We've also got a document called risk assessment for developing for vegetation in the risks. And the one we just barely got out this last year, went for public comment, was in January. We have our closure, post-closure regulations. We're in the process right now of doing the comment resolution on that. Okay, as it says here on this one, the Waste Management Act was an ordinance passed by the Fort Hall Business Council in 2005. We've actually been doing Brownfields since 2005. Brownfield was one of the mechanisms that helped pay for us to develop. And then it's grown over time. We amended it again in 2009. Gives us being the tribe, the authority over environmental issues on the reservation. And it gives us the ability to develop other regulations related to this organization or this ordinance. Just to give you a little bit about our process, it's the nice part about it is it gives the tribes an opportunity to write the regulations. As we're well aware, the EPA has the ultimate regulations. They can delegate authority, and you go through the similar processes. Ours, in this one, we submit a draft to our Fort Hall Business Council. They give us permission. If they give us permission, they give us it's either a resolution or an ordinance, and then we send it out to public comment to have a hearing and to do comment resolution, which is what we're doing right now with our closure, post-closure. And then we submit drafts to EPA and BIA for their comments before it's finalized. And then again, the final version, once we get all the comments, depending upon if there are significant comments, we either go back out for public comment, or if they're minor, you don't have to. So then you accept or explain why you're not accepting the comment. Then the final version gets submitted to the Fort Hall Business Council for their approval. And again, it comes back as either an ordinance that's passed on to the BIA for final approval or a resolution. And as you can tell, our regulations we've been working on regulations since 2005. We do amendments on them. And I understand that, I mean, this is, the next slide after this one, Oos is thank you in Shoshone. And I kid with my staff that I kind of look, if you look at my face and compare it to that gorilla, we kind of look like the same type of deal. And so my deal is what? No environmental regulations. We like to protect ourselves. Make one quick comment that, as Tiffany pointed out, her Aboriginal territory, I'm going to say, is a lot smaller than the Shoshone-Bannock. We've ultimately ranged from the Canada down to Mexico. So we had a very broad area, and we don't need to get into the history of why two tribes were put together. But my contact information is here. It's on the slide. I encourage you, if you have any questions on regulations, to reach out to us. We're willing to help. We can provide you with guidance. We can give you copies of what we've got. We've got them on our webpage. And basically, our regulations are as stringent as the federal, if not more stringent than the state. So we're a little bit excited about that, and we want to protect, again, for at least 7 generations. So at this time, thank you, and I will pass it over to Audrey.
Thank you, Kelly. That was a great presentation, and I hope that other tribes reach out. It's a big challenge to develop regulations. So feel free to reach out to Kelly. He's always available for your call. And Kelly, I will let Susan know about the S in the brownfield, because I know she'll be wanting to know. Even though she's moved on, Susan is our former brownfield coordinator in Region 10. She's moved on to Region 9 in the pesticides program, still working with tribes, but she'll be excited about hearing your use of the S.
Thank you.
It's an ongoing joke in our program. Okay, so Audrey. Audrey is the Brownfields Tribal Response Program Coordinator for the Nez Perce Tribe. And Audrey is going to present today on the Fort Lapwai assessment project. So Audrey, I'll let you take it from here. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My presentation is the site-specific work on Fort Lapwai. So today I'm presenting on behalf of the Nez Perce tribe. So for those of you who might not know, on the right, this is the Nez Perce Reservation. It's located close to Lewiston, close to Moscow, in the northern Idaho area. On the left is the ancestral land that is thought to where we roamed. And so the reservation as it is now is ceded land. The town that I'm going to be talking about specifically is named Lapwai, which means the land of the butterfly. So this is where most of our tribal government is housed, and it's also the location of this particular site. And the value of the butterfly is you have this imagery of rebirth and growth. And I think it's a really great juxtaposition to brownfields because you're taking these areas that might not have a good history or might have hazards, and you're trying to give them a rebirth to better suit the community.
Oh, Audrey, excuse me. Your notes are showing up at the bottom of the slide. I didn't know if you wanted to have it that way.
Oh, are you talking the closed captioning or the notes?
Oh, it's the closed captioning. You're right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just add that on just in case, but I can turn it off if it's
Oh,
distracting.
no, it's very nice. Just wanted to let you know. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the Nez Perce Tribe organization. It's kind of divided into 2 main segments. So we have our tribal government, which deals with things like natural resource, law and justice, GIS systems. So my program, the Brownfields program specifically, is within the natural resources groundwater program. So I take care of the Brownfields tribal response, the UST prevention, and the hazardous emergency response teams. They're mostly interrelated in terms of hazardous. And then the other segment of our government is the enterprise board. So they deal with the commerce. So anything doing with casinos or gas stations, that's what they work on. So when we're looking at potential brownfields property and what to add to our inventory, it's important to know what kind of values represent the community. So several years ago, the University of Idaho conducted a survey asking tribal members how they'd like to prioritize properties. So the number one thing that tribal members said was that community is the most important. So these sites need to be able to hold community members, hold events, and build a stronger sense of connection. So it really needs to be a shared space. The next thing is wellness to the tribe. So of course, anything environmental hazards needs to be taken care of, but we also need to consider the mental and cultural wellness of the tribe. So any area that will help with that will be ranked as important. Making sure that the natural world is preserved and enhanced and not diminished is very important. The site needs to preserve stories and histories. So these areas, once again, need to be places for people to gather and share this cultural experience. And then I can't speak as well to this yet, but when we're looking at redesign and development, specifically using bead colors and having those values represented in those colors is considered very important. So to determine whether or not Fort Lapaway was Brownfields eligible, essentially we looked at the historical past. These buildings are extremely old, so we can make some assumptions about some hazards, but there's also the historical context of how these buildings came to be. And it was something that we wanted to change that narrative of. So that's when we really started closely looking at this area in 2017 to make it Brownfields eligible. So one of the main things about Fort Lapaway is this mental and spiritual health aspect. So Fort Lapaway was originally created as a military reserve. So, you know, it was occupational land, which wasn't great. Then it became an Indian boarding school, and you can see the picture in the background. These are some students. And then it was turned into a tuberculosis ward. So a lot of tribal members remember this specifically, of family members being sent over and maybe not coming back. And then finally, when the tribe was able to get these lands back, they turned it into a public school. But due to these buildings being so old, eventually they had to close because they were no longer serving the purpose properly. So a little more info on this site. There's 6 buildings that were constructed in the early 1900s. We have the West Building, which was the tuberculosis ward, the Superintendent's Building, the North Building, which at one point housed the North Idaho BIA. Then we have the East Building, which was the cafeteria. 2 of the buildings have already been demolished. And then connecting all these buildings are these steam tunnels underneath. So now that we've kind of identified these buildings and the importance and why they were Brownfields eligible, we started to conduct a environmental site assessment phase 1. So this just requires that you do a lot of historical research. So this is kind of the timeline of what happened throughout the years. So in 1862, Camp Lapaway was first established. And then in 1863, the first building was constructed. 1885, it became an Indian boarding school. And in 1893, the military was transferred to a different location, which then became the North Idaho Indian Agency. So then in 1907, the tuberculosis sanatorium opened and started taking in patients. Then in 1912, the Indian boarding school portion of it closed. 1926, more infrastructure was added, but due to structural fires and other, you know, old time record keeping, not much else is known. So we kind of have this gap in time. So then in 1945, the tuberculosis ward closed. 1953, Congress approved to return the land back to the tribe. So then we started working on creating a K-7 school. 1957, the school was remodeled. And then in the 90s, remodeled again. And then finally in 2014, the school district decided to abandon the property because it was not serving its purpose any longer. So when we first started looking at this property, there were some known contaminants. So the natural geology of Idaho leads to very high levels of radon. So over on the left, you can actually see a radon outlet. So this was one issue that needed to be tackled. There were poor ventilation issues, so there was mold everywhere. And then everything that comes with having a building that's abandoned for almost 10 years. So there was vermin and other decay that needed to be addressed. And then for the phase 2, there's many things you can test for, but for commercial buildings, we're mostly concerned with asbestos, lead, and PCBs. So asbestos can be in anything, you know, heating, cooling systems, floor, walls. Lead is mostly in paint structures, And then the PCBs we saw a lot of in the light balusters. So the first test we conducted was the lead test. So there was a XRF, kind of like a ray gun used. It uses an X-ray to see what the fluorescence or other X-ray that bounces out, and it can read how much lead is in a substance. It can also tell you the contents of a lot of other elements, but the lead is what we were using it for. Then the asbestos testing, we took composite sampling, which basically means you chip off little pieces in proportion to what exists in the building, pile that up and test for how much asbestos. And then finally, the PCB testing, which when you have an inspector, they can pretty much read the serial number on the light and tell you whether or not it's a hazard. So that's super cool. So after this phase 2 has ended, there's already been redevelopment ideas. So these are 4 different ideas from the students at University of Idaho. The thing to understand about these properties is there's kind of 2 modes of thought. Some people are very interested in a complete demolition. Some tribal members believe that a restart is better and it would take away the negative and bad energy from the area. There's another group of tribal members that believes that we should preserve some of these buildings to make sure we don't forget this history or this narrative. So we have multiple plans. Some of them keep the original buildings intact, and some of them are a completely different demolition and rebuild. So it's nice to make sure you provide both for your community, depending on how they'll feel years down the road. One building I wanted to talk about specifically was the West Building, or the old tuberculosis ward. One of the ideas was to turn it into a health and wellness center, which I think is a great juxtaposition. They want to have a lobby, a kidney dialysis center, a diabetes clinic, some classrooms and conferences in order to share education and to share this community, the sense of community in the health. Some of the features you'll notice is that there's exposed wood that would be sustainably sourced, keeping this visual of the natural world. There's red and yellow, which are important colors. Also, the room numbers would be in the native language, continuing this cultural connection. And then there's also a lot of light and open space, which was very important. So that concludes my presentation. Brownfields is very important for protecting the environment, but it also serves a very important environmental justice component. And I believe it helps with some of the reparations that are owed to the tribe. It gives us a chance to redevelop these areas in ways that can better suit our needs. So thank you so much. And we'll probably move on to questions here pretty soon.
Thank you, Audrey, for the fabulous presentation. Very exciting to see all the redevelopment plans. This project has gone on for a long time, lots of different funding, including a targeted brownfields assessment that was done by EPA on behalf of the tribe. So with that, I think that ends our presentations. And if the panelists would like to show themselves on video, I'm just looking to see if we have any questions in the chat right now. I don't see any. And so I'll go ahead and ask one of Audrey, since it's fresh in my mind. Where right now, when you're working on the assessment and things, are you, and you're talking about redevelopment, what stage are you at with the redevelopment? It looks like you've had some good design work. What's your timeline?
Originally, we were going to start demolition, I think, next month. So the idea is that we had concluded most of everything in our discovery and our environmental site assessments. Cultural Resources has come and said, well, maybe we want to take a look at a few things. So right now the timeline's a little unclear, but the hope is maybe by the end of the year or by the end of next year, we can move forward with some kind of plan or idea for redevelopment. So.
Thank you, Audrey. Oh, we have a question. Are there any brownfield activities that would be available under a competitive grant that can't be accomplished with a tribal response program?
This is Kelly. I'll answer from the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. We have not put in for one yet. Most everything that we get through the state tribal response grants been able to help us identify those. We're looking, because it was my understanding, and this has been since 2005, that the other grant is you get one, so to speak, one grant that can do that. So we're looking to do something down the road, not in the current process. But we're excited this year because the bipartisan infrastructure law is going to help in a lot of the other areas that we've put in for before, and help us expand our building capacity, as well as hopefully provide some economic development for the communities.
Thank you, Kelly. So I'll just say that along the lines of what Kelly was saying, the state and tribal response program can be used to provide some limited site assessment and cleanup. In the past, it's a challenge because we only have so much funding available. So if a tribe would want to apply for a cleanup grant or assessment grant, and a multi-purpose, which is a kind of combination grant with also planning, is certainly eligible, and we encourage them to do so. And they can kind of focus in on the site assessments and cleanups and the site-specific work with that funding. So we do encourage that. And with the infrastructure law funding that Kelly mentioned, of course, that's going to offer some additional ability to do some site-specific work. But it's a larger pot of money, but there's going to be a lot of requests. So we'll see. So we do encourage everybody to apply. The competitive grant program also will have a lot of infrastructure law funding as well. So that is an option. And so here we have another question from John. Great presentations. Are tribes utilizing, or can tribes utilize Brownfields phase ones to assist in their fee to trust transactions?
I'll answer that one. Now you got me on a soapbox that I'm going to beat up on BIA. The Portland office made a mistake. Well, okay, how do I want to politely say that? Stan Speaks, when he was the superintendent for the Portland office, passed a letter through his deal that says tribes in the Pacific Northwest cannot do their own ESAs. I've been trying to get the current one to do that, because we've been trying on 2 parcels that have been nothing more than agricultural parcels that we've had in our coffers since the 70s. And we have yet to get the fee to trust done. Each time, it's unfortunate the fee to trust takes 180 days limit on BIA, and they can't get it. Well, in our region, they can't get it done. We have done 3 different times. I've had 2 outside contractors, and the last one, we did it as a tribe because we were in the process of changing things out. And we were hoping that our ESAs, because we do the due diligence on all properties that are purchased by the tribe. So if we're doing the due diligence, we understand what the protocols are for fee to trust. And yeah, unfortunately, in the Pacific Northwest, that's not allowed by BIA.
Kelly, when you say it's not allowed, do you mean that you do that you do your own or that you hire a contractor to do it?
You have to hire a contractor to do it.
Okay. So they don't recognize that the tribe might have their own qualified environmental professional? That's been an issue?
Yep.
Okay. Good to know. Interesting. Thanks for sharing.
Wish it would have been a positive thing, because that's where you look at all the other regional offices and they allow tribes to do that. They can conduct it if you do a phase one and you haven't identified any recognized conditions. And that's what happened here was, I don't know which states they were, I have my suspicions, but 2 parcels were brought into BIA's coffer that had contamination. And as a result, instead of disciplining the individuals that were doing the deal, they disciplined everybody. And so we, that until that gets changed, I don't think that they're gonna, and I mean, that's just the process.
Great. I know that some other tribes in the Region 10 area, including the Jamestown Squam, do have, they're probably hiring consultants to do phase ones to turn fee into trust. So that is going on, but they must be doing it with consultants.
Yeah, no, you can, if you use a consultant, you can do that, but what's the difference between a consultant and a tribe? We have the same ability and knowledge, actually better knowledge at times. So why can't we do it?
Right. So that's, just to clarify, that's a decision by the BIA,
Yes.
Bureau of Indian Affairs. Okay, great. Thanks, Kelly. And then we have a question. How many tribes in Idaho have tribal response programs? So actually, the 3 tribes that are presenting today have tribal response programs, but other tribes are eligible to apply. So not all tribes in the nation have response programs. So we encourage any tribes that are listening today to apply, reach out to our presenters today and also to EPA, and we can kind of have some conversations about how the program might work well for you. Any advice you would give, Kelly, Tiffany, or Audrey, tribes seeking either competitive or funding or the state and tribal response program funding?
My only my 2 cents would be, we've been actively involved with EPA Brownfields since 2005. They're here to help. It's probably one of the best programs that EPA has, in my opinion. And I've been working in the environmental field for over 30 years, and they've been very helpful. If you know the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, we have some discrepancies with EPA on other deals, but at the same time, I mean, I'll go back with the regulatory development. Our Waste Management Act was one of the reasons we went to court, federal court, and then the Supreme Court denied FMC. And so it's gone through tribal court and federal court, and they agree that it's at least as good, if not better than some. So a special thanks to EPA for what they've done under Brownfield. We've got numerous, I mean, our hotel event center, if you come by, that's part of our Brownfields opportunities that we've done. And we're always looking, as they tell us, we're capacity building by trying to expand and do new things. So I would encourage you, I understand this is where it becomes the tough part, is a lot of tribes don't have the necessary resources. And when I mean resources, this is going to be staff. Many of you are well aware, you wear different hats. You know, you go with EPA, and you got a CERCLA program, you got a RCRA program. Under RCRA, you got the UST program. You got Brownsfield that got moved over into the RCRA program. So, I mean, there's just, Yeah, unfortunately, we wear many hats and the others are wearing single hats. So it's a little confusing at times.
Right. Thank you, Kelly. The hats look good. You wear the hats well. We appreciate all the great work you're doing. And we have another question, and I don't know, Greg, I think we're happy to stay on for a few more minutes and answer questions. Is everyone available?
Sure, Terry, I would say we've got one more question, and then if there are any closing thoughts from Tiffany or Audrey or anyone, that'd be great. So we've got
Okay, thanks, Greg. We have a question from Caitlin. Are these efforts for a tribe to support another tribe to enter the Brownfield and Tribal Response Program? I'm sorry, are there efforts for a tribe to support another tribe to enter the Brownfield and Tribal Response Programs? So does anybody have thoughts on that?
I think, you know, most of our reservations are massive. And yeah, it would be a large effort to have combined efforts on one reservation. And I'm not really sure the relationships between the tribes. I do know that sometimes we have overlap when it comes to like discussing mining or discussing super funds. To my knowledge, Brownfields, I'm not sure we're necessarily collaborating at this point.
I think from the Coeur d'Alene tribe's perspective, anytime another tribe reaches out to us for any assistance, we're always happy to provide any assistance, any support, any information that we have. We're willing to share whatever experience we have with other tribes. And I think at this point in the tribe's Brownfields program, we're more reaching out to other tribes to try and get help from them. So maybe in the future, we can do more helping.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, Tiffany. Any last thoughts from you, Kelly, on that?
On that one, as they've all stated, you know, we're willing to share. My biggest deal is I'm long-winded, so if you call, expect to be on the call for a few minutes or two, and then hopefully we can get it answered. And if I don't know the answer, I can point you in the direction that I'm aware of. Because I've had several different tribes reach out on some different things and been able to share to get different people within EPA with them. So we're here to help. The typical EPA or the government response. We're here to help and we'll do the best we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Kelly. So I'll just say in closing that our state and tribal response program is a very critical part of our Brownfield program. We EPA tries to work collaboratively with the tribes, and we reach out on a regular basis with contact information. So we've seen quite a bit of collaboration going on, and everybody's busy, but like Tiffany and Kelly and Audrey have said, there's always room to collaborate and partner and share. It's why reinvent the wheel? You can reach out and get some help and examples, and then just go from there. So thank you everyone for joining today, and thank you to our three panelists. It's been great working with you over the last few weeks and collaborating in the panel. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and feel free to reach out anytime with questions. We're here to help, as Kelly says. So with that, I'll pass it back to Greg for the closing. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Terry. And again, thank you, panelists, for joining us today and sharing with us. And I'll have copies of their presentations, and they'll be available for those of you that maybe jumped in late or want to just have a copy of that resource. So again, we have about 10 minutes until the next session, which is our municipal panel. So if you want to visit some of the sponsor pages, take a look at the literature and materials that they have. There's some videos, there's some downloadable documents. Please feel free to do so. There's also that interactive expo tab. So click on that, register with your name, click on the little green icon that will appear, and you can move that around. So with that, we'll see you back in about 10 minutes. Again, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.